All right, so we are here today with Commander Werle from the Sheriff's Office. We are at the 911 call center. They do all kinds of amazing things here besides just take 911 calls, but specifically we're here today to talk about hurricane preparedness and what we need to know this year that may be different from other years in light of everything that's going on.
Absolutely.
So the first thing I want you to say is, what's different this year? Anything different that we should know about in light of maybe going to the shelters, or what should we prepare?
Well, the biggest thing on most people's mind is the COVID-19 pandemic and how that's going to look like with shelters. And traditionally, St. Johns County also needs to remember that we've received glancing blows from 2 or 3 hurricanes, from Matthew, Irma, and maybe Dorian. And we got little impacts from that. That people still have not experienced a direct impact of a hurricane in St. Johns County since probably Dora in 1964.
So if I decide this year, I'm more scared of the pandemic than a hurricane, what would you tell me? Is that, should I be more scared of a hurricane, or should I really be more scared of?
I would say with the hurricanes, the most important thing with hurricanes is we know it's coming. We have advance notice. The National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center Service do a great job at pinpointing the direction of the hurricane, but it's still Mother Nature, and we don't have 100% accuracy on where the hurricane is going and the magnitude and impact. So what we encourage is a culture of preparedness. We have plenty of advance notice in a hurricane, and that's to our advantage. Use that to your advantage. Listen to local authorities and really evacuate if needed. With the shelters and COVID-19, we're really encouraging people, if they have to evacuate, they're in evacuation zones and a mandatory evacuation order is implemented, to evacuate to maybe family or friends, and go maybe tens of miles, not necessarily hundreds of miles. And realistically, we're trying to use shelters as a very, very last resort if people have to evacuate and no other place to go.
Okay, that's great news. So where can I get these local updates? I know a lot of us tend to watch the news, but what if I just want to know what's happening here in St. Johns County? Where can I go to look for these updates?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. During a big storm like this, all the county government and emergency services, the fire rescue, the police departments, the sheriff's office, we all come together and have a unified message in a joint information center. So the PD, St. Augustine Beach, St. Augustine, the sheriff's office, emergency management, all the fire rescue departments, and county and city government come together and push out one message on their different platforms. Social media platform, if you Google St. Johns County Emergency Management, information there. I recommend you following the Sheriff's Office and all the other county entities' Facebook pages, Twitter pages, and Instagram. We all push out the same information, a unified message on a regular basis. So that's how our citizens in St. Johns County can get the most up-to-date, reliable information of what is happening in St. Johns County specifically. Because sometimes we know the news is more of a regional impact. And this is a way to get more pinpointed information.
So say the storm is here and an emergency happens. Who do I call?
Well, we are still, our emergency services are still going to be out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 911 is always available. But I would caution you, there are some times where, through our experience, even Matthew and Irma, where we received a glancing blow, the conditions were so bad and potentially dangerous for emergency service providers, firefighters, paramedics, deputy sheriffs, police officers, that we may not be able to respond to you if the winds are too great, if the storm surge is too high. So still call 911, but just know that if you're given an evacuation order in your particular zone, know your zone, know your house, and know what to anticipate, and listen to the local authorities that everything will be okay.
And how do I find out where my zone is?
So a good question. So there's many places. One is the emergency management of St. Johns County produces these pamphlets every year, It has all the information you need to know, and it's also online. Again, just Google St. Thomas County Emergency Management, and in their on their website and in these booklets are evacuation zones. And we have to remember the evacuation zones are based upon storm surge, potential storm surge, which is really water from the intracoastal, the river, and the ocean being pushed into the hurricane, and it's going to come back out at some point. But that is what causes the most damage and the most destruction of life, is that storm surge. And that's what we really can't predict. So if you're in an area that is in an evacuation zone A, B, C, going all the way to evacuation zone F, listen to the evacuation orders, and please evacuate if you are in one of these areas.
So I'm kind of looking at the map and I'm seeing something. If I live on the beach or I live downtown, I know that those are flood zones. Are there other significant flood zones in St. Johns County, or is it just there along the beach and coast?
It's so the evacuation zones A through F are based upon the storm surge analysis, based on what we just talked about. But there's other areas. You see the central St. Johns County is not necessarily meant to evacuate from storm surge, but a direct impact from a hurricane will bring very high winds, very torrential downfalls. You can still have flooding from rain. You may not have storm surge from the ocean if you're 20 miles inland, but it could still have some pretty treacherous impacts, loss of electricity, really scary for families. Potential trees down. Trees are a big problem and cause a lot of damage to houses. So we just basically recommend, even the people are not outside of evacuation zones or are not inside evacuation zones, to really evaluate the need to stay. Can you go a little further west or maybe a little further south of the storm or north of the storm, especially if it's going to have a direct impact on you? Because certainly no matter where you are, hurricane impacts are not fun and potentially dangerous.
So you brought up a really good point. And I've seen this, but I didn't know the answer. After a storm, lots of trees are down. You may see a down power line. Who or what do we call to report that?
So that's a great question. That's probably one of the number one challenges that we have post-storm is, especially with social media, Susie will be putting on her that she stayed, and she will be putting on her social media that everything's fine there in Ponte Vedra, and her neighbors see that. But 10 miles down the road, maybe a pop-up tornado occurred, and it's complete devastation, and there's power lines down. It's just not safe for citizens to go back in. So post-storm, the county entities, to include the sheriff's office and all the police departments, we do a rapid damage assessment, and we try to really cordon off the areas that maybe need a little extra time. That's where we might be holding the bridges for a while, not allowing anybody to get back. We just deemed it not safe quite yet. And people get really upset and angry, but they need to realize that, yeah, it could be okay in Ponte Vedra, but Ponte Vedra connects to Volano Beach, and we have to hold that line there because Volano Beach could be devastated. Hurricane impacts vary from location to location, and sometimes pop-up tornadoes may specifically target an area even more specific. So it's really hard to tell when you're just looking at social media or the news of what really impacts are there at your house.
So you brought up another good question. I know I've seen as a citizen that you all are out there after the storm, like immediately, absolutely, like right on it. Where do you weather the storm at that you can get out there that quickly? Well,
some of our deputies that are posted at bridges and things of that nature, they're weathering it out there in the field unless it becomes absolutely too dangerous. We have site security deputies and police officers roving just to make sure our communities are safe. But at some point, if the conditions are too bad, we do have to pull back our units. And that's where community partnerships come in. We have businesses, churches, schools, because it is hard to house. The sheriff's office is just not big enough to house all of our deputies. So we have to partner with those areas where we fall back, so to speak, wait till the worst of the storm has passed, and then immediately we give it all clear, and then we immediately go back out there in the field and start doing the damage assessment.
So I guess this is maybe the last question because you brought up some good things. Say I don't live on the island, but I'm over on the island and it looks like it closed, or it was Irma. One of the camera crews got caught on the island. Can I come off once the mandatory evacuation?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the barrier islands, which St. Johns County is unique to have barrier islands, no matter what time of day, night, or who is at the bridge manning the bridge, we just don't want people to go into the islands. You could always go out, but there's going to be at some point where it's probably safer if you decided not to evacuate. At some point, it's going to be really a judgment call on what kind of conditions you're figuring out right then and there. Is it safer to leave or is it safer to stay? And we just can't make that call because it's based upon the circumstances that people are dealing with right there at that time. That's why we strongly encourage everyone to evacuate when it's an evacuation order and know your evacuation zone. It's really easy to figure out where you are. You go to the emergency management website, you can plug in your address, and it will tell you A, B, C, or D. Correlate that with a map, and you can figure out. And the evacuation zone messages are very clear about which evacuation zone we are ordering to evacuate.
Okay, this really is the last question. So during a hurricane, I have a non-emergency question. Mm-hmm. Where do I call?
So that's another great question because at the sheriff's office, we answer all 911 calls, but we also have our non-emergency number. But with our 911 and our non-emergency number, we get inundated. And a lot of people call 911 for non-emergency related issues because they just don't know who else to call. The EOC at St. Johns County stands up a citizens information line, which is prepared and has all the information to receive that influx of calls. So that number is 824-5550, 824-5550, and that's the citizens information line at the St. Johns County Emergency Operations Center, the EOC.
Well, thank you. This has been really enlightening.
My pleasure.
So we'll see.